Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the next installment on PPMD's ongoing webinar series. My name is Ryan Fisher with PPMD. Today we are pleased to have Dr. Jenny LaForette with Sarepta Therapeutics joining us to talk about Sarepta's Essence study. So Dr. LaForette serves as Sarepta's medical director, leading the SRP-4053 and SRP-4045 clinical development programs. She's a psychiatrist and biochemist by training and has worked in a variety of therapeutic areas at both bench and bedside with a focus on neurodegenerative, neurodevelopmental, and neuromuscular diseases. We're really delighted to have her present today. So just some housekeeping before we get started. Following Jenny's presentation, she will be answering a number of the questions submitted prior to the webinar. Due to the large number of questions submitted and at the sponsor's request, we won't be addressing live questions. But if a question does come to mind, you can either type it in the chat box in the lower left-hand corner, and we will send those on to the Sarepta team. Or another option, you can please feel free to submit your questions directly to Sarepta via the following email, and they will contact you back. So that's medinfo@sarepta.com. So I know the community is quite anxious to hear more about the Essence study. So with that, I'd like to hand this over to Jenny to begin the presentation, and then we can come back later for the Q&A. Jenny?
Great. Thank you so much for your kind introduction, Ryan. On behalf of the Sarepta and the Essence team, I'd like to convey our thanks to PPMD for the opportunity to talk to you today about the Essence clinical trial. The Essence trial is a double-blind, placebo-controlled, multi-center study with an open-label extension to evaluate the efficacy and safety of SRP-4045 and SRP-4053 in patients with Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Before getting into the details about the trial, I'll provide a brief introduction to Sarepta and what our company does, then give an overview of exon skipping and the clinical development programs for SRP-4053 and 4045. And then after that background, I'll turn to the Essence trial itself and provide information about the trial design, about the locations where the trial is being conducted, and the activities that participants will perform during the trial. And as Ryan mentioned, at the end, there will be a question and answer session in which I'll respond to advanced questions that came in through PPMD's web portal prior to today's program. And also, as he mentioned, any questions that we don't get to or that might come up during or after the webinar, please feel free to send them directly to medinfo@sarepta.com. So now, let me just start with a brief introduction to Sarepta. So we're a U.S.-based company with headquarters in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and a manufacturing facility in Andover, Massachusetts. We have a workforce of approximately 200 employees, and the company's focus is on developing new therapies for rare neuromuscular diseases, particularly Duchenne muscular dystrophy. What's been known since the 1980s that Duchenne is caused by mutations or errors in the gene that carries the instructions to make the important muscle protein dystrophin. The most common kinds of Duchenne mutations are so-called deletion mutations, in which large sections of information are missing from the dystrophin gene. The result of these deletion mutations is an absence or a near absence of dystrophin protein in muscle. Sarepta is developing investigational products designed to target these kinds of deletion mutations to allow production of a shortened form of dystrophin protein via a mechanism known as exon skipping. So what is exon skipping all about? As shown in the first diagram, under normal conditions, the message carrying the instructions for making dystrophin protein contains all its components. These are called exons. And this allows production of a normal, full-length dystrophin protein. In most cases of Duchenne, however, one or more of these exons is missing, as shown in the second diagram. And as a result, the information downstream of this missing section is shifted, such that the instructions for making dystrophin protein become garbled. They become gobbledygook, basically. And so the protein that gets made is so abnormal that it gets broken down. And the result is that there's very little to no dystrophin protein in the cell. As shown in the bottom half of the slide, the concept behind exon skipping is to drive removal or skipping of an adjacent exon so that the downstream instructions are back in register and they convey the correct information for making dystrophin again. The intended result is production of a shorter form of dystrophin protein that's missing a section in the middle, but the bulk of the protein on either side is intact. The two investigational products being studied in the ESSENCE trial, SRP-4053 and SRP-4045, are designed to skip exons 53 and 45, respectively. We don't know whether these investigational products will be effective in causing exon skipping or allow production of shortened dystrophin protein in muscle, and these are the questions that the ESSENCE trial is trying to answer. Prior to ESSENCE, SRP-4053 and SRP-4045 were first studied in two clinical trials that are currently ongoing. The first trial, you'll see on the turquoise bars, this is for SRP-4053, study 4053-101. This is being conducted in the United Kingdom, France, and Italy, and it was launched with European Union funding provided to the SKIP NMD Consortium. This is a group of academic and industry partners who are collaborating on this trial. Enrollment in this trial is closed, and currently 25 Duchenne patients amenable to exon 53 skipping are receiving open-label treatment with SRP-4053. In addition, a group of 14 patients with mutations amenable to other exon skips has also been enrolled, and this group is being followed in parallel with the treated patients as an untreated control or comparison group. And moving down to the magenta bars below, the first trial for SRP-4045, called Study 4045-101, is being conducted in the United States. Enrollment for this trial is also closed, and currently 12 advanced stage Duchenne patients amenable to exon 45 skipping are receiving open-label treatment with SRP-4045. There's no untreated control group in this trial. So with all of that background behind us then, let's now turn to the ESSENCE study itself. Here you can see a schematic of the ESSENCE trial design. As shown on the left half of the slide, the first part of ESSENCE consists of a 96-week, double-blind, placebo-controlled period in which patients will be randomized in a 2-to-1 ratio to receive active drug, either SRP-4045 or SRP-4053, depending on the patient's genotype, or to placebo, administered once a week by intravenous infusion. Approximately 99 Duchenne patients with mutations amenable to exon 45 or exon 53 skipping will be enrolled. After completion of the double-blind placebo-controlled period, all patients may transition to open-label active treatment with weekly IV infusions of SRP-4045 or SRP-4053, according to their genotype, for an additional 96 weeks. The primary endpoint, the clinical readout, if you will, for ESSENCE, is change from baseline in 6-minute walk test distance. I'd like to point out a few important details about the trial. As indicated by the two tan circles on the upper left, marked B, all patients will have 2 upper arm muscle biopsies performed, one prior to starting treatment and one at week 48. These biopsies will be used to assess whether there is exon skipping and production of dystrophin protein in the muscle. Another important feature of the trial is the interim analysis indicated by the red star. In order to minimize the duration of placebo exposure, if possible, an interim efficacy analysis will be performed after 75% of patients have reached week 48. And results will be reviewed by an independent data monitoring committee. And if there's overwhelming evidence of efficacy, the double-blind placebo-controlled period would stop, and all patients would transition early to open-label active treatment. So moving on to some more details, this slide summarizes the key eligibility criteria for the ESSENCE trial. Participants must be Duchenne boys aged 7 to 13 years inclusive, so up to but not including their 14th birthday, with mutations amenable to exon 45 or exon 53 skipping. They must be able to walk an average distance of 300 to 450 meters on the 6-minute walk test, and they must be on a stable dose of corticosteroids for at least 6 months prior to starting dosing in the study. There are additional inclusion and exclusion criteria, many of which are listed on www.clinicaltrials.gov under the clinicaltrials.gov identifier NCT02500381. If you want to get more specifics about eligibility, please contact one of the study sites that are listed on clinicaltrials.gov, and they can give you more details. So this map indicates the ESSENCE trial sites that are currently active in the United States. Beyond the ones already noted here, additional sites are in the process of being identified and activated, and clinicaltrials.gov is always the most up-to-date source for that information. As new sites open, they'll be added there, and that's where that news will be first available. So ESSENCE is not just a U.S. study, but really is multinational. So there are also several other countries in North America, Europe, and the Middle East that are or will soon be participating. The hot pink stars in the map on the right show sites that are currently active in the UK, in Belgium, and in Italy. In the UK, sites are open in London and Newcastle. In Belgium, sites are open in Ghent and Leuven. And in Italy, there's one site open in Rome. Additional clinical sites are planned in the United Kingdom, in Italy, as well as Germany, Spain, France, Czech Republic, Sweden, Israel, and Canada. So as with the U.S. sites, again, please refer to clinicaltrials.gov for the latest roster of active sites by country. And now we'll turn to more specifics about what goes on during the ESSENCE trial. This slide shows the activities that patients who are interested in participating in ESSENCE will do to determine if they're eligible for this study. This process is called screening. And the screening period lasts up to 8 weeks and consists of 4 steps. So starting on the left, the first step is a screening visit at a local ESSENCE trial site. And local site is usually one that's nearest to the patient's home. And at that time, the study investigator at the site will meet with the patient and his parents or guardians, tell them about the study, what it involves, including potential risks, and answer any questions. And if the patient and his parents or guardians confirm that they understand and they agree to participate, they will provide their informed assent and consent, at which point the patient can start screening in the study. First, inclusion and exclusion criteria will be reviewed. There'll be blood samples drawn for safety laboratory tests, for genotyping to confirm if the patient is amenable to exon 45 or exon 53 skipping. And also we collect biomarkers. These are kind of chemical fingerprints, if you will, of Duchenne that can be followed over the course of the trial. Patients will also have a physical examination and their medical history will be reviewed. So if all of the information collected up to that point meets the criteria for the study, then the patient will move on to a screening visit at a so-called hub site. Depending on where the patient lives, this may require additional travel. At this visit, the patients will do 6-minute walk test and other assessments of walking and arm and hand function, as well as pulmonary function tests to assess their breathing, and an ECG and an echocardiogram to assess heart function. So if the patient still meets criteria for the study, he'll come back about 3 to 5 weeks later for another hub visit in which he'll repeat these tests that he had before. And this is to really be sure that his walking ability and other functional tests still meet the requirements of the study. So only after the patient has gone through these first 3 steps and is determined to be eligible for the study, then he will move on to have a pre-treatment muscle biopsy. And this visit also may require additional travel. At this visit, the patient will have safety lab tests done and have samples of muscle taken from his upper arm. All of this is done as a surgical procedure under anesthesia. So after the screening period has been completed, patients who are eligible will start coming in to their local study site to receive the weekly IV infusions of study drug or placebo. In addition, there will be safety laboratory tests performed. Those are every week for the first 8 weeks of the study, and then they go to about every 3 months. Now, at every weekly infusion visit, vital signs will be checked, and information will be collected about any changes in the patient's health, so-called adverse events, and medications the patient is taking will be recorded. Every month, as you see in the upper right, patients will also have a physical examination, and then will have their height and weight taken. So approximately every 3 months, patients will go to their hub site for functional assessment. And those that were done during the screening period. We just had a momentary loss of power here at the Sarepta building, and I want to confirm with those on the line that you can still hear me speaking.
We can still hear you coming through.
Okay, great, excellent. So the phone still works, and we're back in the lights. And
can you see the screen?
We can watch it on the laptop.
Ah, there you go.
So thank you. Well, that was a moment of excitement. So let me go back a little bit. So approximately every 3 months, patients will go to their hub site for functional assessments, just like those ones that were done during the screening period. And again, this may require additional travel. So these assessments include, as I mentioned, the 6-minute walk test, the North Star ambulatory assessment, and others. And also pulmonary function tests and ECG and echocardiograms will be performed. Now, at certain visits, samples will be taken for so-called pharmacokinetic or PK measurements, and these are intended to assess levels of SRP-4045 or SRP-4053 in the blood and in the urine. And as mentioned before, patients will have a muscle biopsy of their upper arm at the beginning of the study, then again at week 48 of the double-blind placebo-controlled treatment period. So as you can tell from the description of the study activities, ESSENCE involves many different kinds of tests and procedures that can take place at different study locations. As such, for most patients and families, depending on where they live, travel will be required. So in order to reduce the burden of travel and study participation as much as possible, Sarepta has engaged the services of a travel company, Greenfire. Greenfire will provide help to families for travel arrangements, for study visits, reimbursement for travel expenses according to the approved travel policy, and help with any applicable prepaid expenses. So interested families can talk with staff at a participating ESSENCE site for more details about the travel services and support that may be available. So now shifting gears just a little bit, I'd like to introduce a new aspect of the study that's recently been rolled out. There's no question that there are important aspects of how a patient is doing that can't really be captured by the kinds of standard assessments that are done in clinical trials. Being able to track a patient's function at home, how he's doing with his everyday activities and the things he loves to do, this is also a really critical dimension to understand if an investigational drug is really offering meaningful benefits. And so that's why 2 mothers of Duchenne boys have partnered with Sarepta to develop 2 new caregiver assessments just for this purpose. These assessments are done at the beginning of the study and then every 3 months and consist of, first, a web-based questionnaire that asks caregivers to assess how the patient is doing with different kinds of everyday physical activities. And in addition, caregivers will take videos of their boys walking at home using a mobile app. And these videos are reviewed by a master physiotherapist who scores different aspects of how the boy is walking in his natural home and environment. And we really hope that these new caregiver assessments will provide helpful real-world information about the effects of SRP-4045 and SRP-4053 in Duchenne boys over the course of the study, and really kind of complement and add more information beyond what we're already collecting with clinical assessments. So that's the end of my presentation about the ESSENCE trial. I appreciate your attention, and I'd be glad to answer these pre-submitted questions, and I'll turn it over to Ryan. Oh, here's a bit of information again about where you can go with follow-up questions to medinfo@sarepta.com. And clinicaltrials.gov, the trial identifier is NCT 025 00381. So thank you.